In the bustling streets of Berlin, the year was 1938, and the air crackled with tension. Flags bearing swastikas fluttered proudly in the wind, and the fervor of nationalism coursed through the veins of the German people. Among them was Hans Schmidt, a young man with dreams of glory and a fervent belief in the promise of the Third Reich. Hans had grown up in the shadow of World War I, hearing tales of valor and sacrifice from his father, who had fought in the trenches. But for Hans, the war was a distant memory, overshadowed by the promise of a new era under the leadership of Adolf Hitler. He was swept up in the excitement of the Hitler Youth, marching proudly in uniform and chanting slogans of loyalty to the fatherland. As tensions mounted across Europe, Hans found himself caught in a whirlwind of propaganda and political intrigue. Hitler's ambitions knew no bounds, and whispers of conquest echoed through the halls of power. The annexation of Austria was hailed as a triumph of German unity, but Hans sensed darker forces at work beneath the surface. In the quiet town of Krakow, Poland, a young woman named Anna Novak watched with trepidation as the storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Her family had lived through the horrors of the Great War, and the scars of conflict still lingered in their memories. But Anna refused to be cowed by fear, finding solace in her studies and the warmth of her family's love. Yet, as the rumblings of war grew louder, Anna could not escape the sense of foreboding that gripped her heart. When news reached Krakow of the German occupation of Czechoslovakia, her fears were confirmed and she vowed to do whatever it took to protect her homeland from the encroaching darkness. In the corridors of power, diplomats danced a delicate dance of diplomacy, seeking to avert the looming catastrophe. Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of Britain, embarked on a policy of appeasement, hoping to appease Hitler's appetite for conquest and preserve the fragile peace of Europe. But his efforts were in vain, as Hitler's ambitions only grew bolder with each concession. Meanwhile, in the Kremlin, Joseph Stalin watched with a calculating eye as the chess pieces of international politics were moved across the board. The Soviet Union had emerged from the chaos of revolution and civil war as a formidable power, and Stalin saw an opportunity to expand his influence in the face of German aggression. In the summer of 1939, the stage was set for the final act of the tragedy that would engulf the world in flames. In a secret pact, Hitler and Stalin carved up Eastern Europe between them, sealing the fate of millions with the stroke of a pen. On September 1st, the German war machine rolled across the Polish border, unleashing a torrent of violence and destruction. For Hans Schmidt, it was a moment of triumph as he marched into battle alongside his comrades, his heart swelling with pride at the thought of glory and conquest. But the reality of war was far from the glorious vision he had been promised. As the bombs fell and the bullets flew, Hans saw the true face of conflict, a brutal, senseless struggle that left only death and despair in its wake. In Krakow, Anna Novak watched in horror as her city was consumed by the flames of war. With each passing day, the walls closed in around her, and she knew that the time had come to take a stand. Gathering what courage she could muster, she joined the ranks of the Polish resistance, determined to fight for freedom against impossible odds. As the war raged on, the echoes of conflict reverberated across the globe, leaving no corner untouched by its terrible grasp. From the streets of London to the jungles of the Pacific, brave men and women stood shoulder to shoulder against the tide of tyranny, their courage a beacon of hope in a world consumed by darkness. And so, in the twilight of 1939, the world stood on the brink of cataclysmic change, poised on the edge of a precipice from which there could be no return. The seeds of destruction had been sown, and the flames of war burned ever brighter, casting a shadow that would darken the pages of history for generations to come.